Welcome everyone, konnichiwa. Going to be continuing on with our basic grammar today. Going to be stepping into verbs, so a bit of a big topic compared to adjectives and nouns, but we're going to be using a lot of the same principles we've already studied. Now this document I have up on screen is a Google Doc, the link to which you can find in the YouTube description. I'd really recommend you open that up and follow along with the lesson. Today's date is 5日、11月2018年. Now in today's lesson, we're going to learn how to recognize verbs and also how to classify them into groups. The first thing to be aware of with verbs is that all the things that we've learned to do with state of being, and you can check all my previous videos, but when we talk about nouns and adjectives, for examples, lots of words are implied, like he is, you are. All these words are generally implied in Japanese. And we're going to see that exactly the same thing happens with verbs. Now as an example, we're going to take the word eat. I've got the dictionary extract here from Jim Breen's dictionary, but we see that the word eat in Japanese is taberu. So if we take this word taberu and we just say it, there actually are quite a few possible meanings of this. If we just say taberu, we see that this could be I eat, she eats, they eat, he eats. Any of these could be a possible translation of this word. And for example, we can put a question mark or a kind of rising intonation with the same word. And then again, we've got quite a few translations it could be. But if we said taberu, it's more asking a question like, do you want to eat? Will you eat? This kind of thing. So where do we start with verbs in Japanese? Well, when we want to say things like I ate, he ate, they ate, it was eaten. These are all kind of different tenses of the verb. So we're going to want to get here at some point talking about all the different tenses of a verb. But before we can make a verb into the past form or the negative form, we first need to determine what type of verb it is, because the rules that we apply are different. Now, there are many different ways that this gets referred to. When I was doing this in high school, these were called Group 1 and Group 2 and Group 3 verbs. I never really liked that terminology. There's also one which is called Godan verbs and Ichidan verbs. Again, I don't really like that terminology. You can use it if you want and you're comfortable with it. But I kind of copy take him and use ru verbs and u verbs. I think this is a pretty common sense way to approach grouping verbs. And which verb is a ru verb and which verb is an u verb, the title of the rule itself kind of gives it away. But let's look at these in a bit more detail. So we can see we've got a table here. Now this is not filled in, but we see we've got a column of ru verbs, we've got a column for u verbs, and then we have our exceptions. Now exceptions, there are actually a few more exceptions, but those are only specific exceptions, for example, the negative form. But when we're talking about these two exceptions, these are exceptions to every single type of verb change. So we have to memorize them and what their results are, rather than kind of using a rule. So the exceptions we have here are suru and kuru. So suru is to do and kuru is to come. So these are very common verbs, so we're going to get used to saying the exception versions of these pretty quickly. Now over the next few lessons, we're going to basically be coming across a lot of different verbs. And we're going to go through, I guess, the way I think about verbs is that whenever you get a verb and then you want to make a change to it, you have to first determine, is it a ru verb or is it an u verb or is it one of the exception verbs? Because the rules we apply are going to be different. Now, the one problem with this rule is that it's not completely foolproof. And when I say that, there is a way to tell if something is an u verb a lot of the time. But what's going to be an issue is that when we have a verb, which could be a ru verb or it could be an u verb, we don't really know. Now this isn't going to be a problem with every single verb, just kind of a specific class of verbs. But anyway, we'll have a look at them. So what do I mean when I talk about ru verbs and u verbs? Well, firstly, a ru verb has to end in a ru, okay? Whereas an u verb can end in anything on the u column, including a ru. So maybe some of you will already be able to see the problem. We'll have some verbs that end in a ru, and we don't know if it's an u verb or it's a ru verb. And that's really the only rule that we have to know for now. Now I've got a list here of some common verbs that are definitely worth learning. So we'll just go through these quickly. We have taberu, we just saw that one, to eat. We have miru, which is to watch or see. We have hanasu, which is to speak, kiku, to ask or listen, kau, to buy, and aru, to exist. Now I have put a few of these in yellow, and we'll see that these are the obvious candidates to be u verbs. Because remember what our rule says, for a verb to be a root verb, it has to end with the hiragana ru. Now hanasu, kiku, and kau, we see that none of these end with a ru, so there's no way that they can be a ru verb. So we don't even really have to think about these. This is definitely an u verb. So it's these other ones that I've left in orange that we're going to have to apply the rule to work out if it's a ru verb that ends in ru, or is it just a u verb that ends in ru. Now, as I flagged before, this rule is not going to be 100% foolproof. But let's have a read of it and see what's going on. So it says, for verbs ending in ru, if the vowel sound preceding the ru is an a, u, or o vowel sound, it will always be an u verb. Okay, so this part of the rule, it's solid. It says if it's an a, u, or o, it has to be an u verb. Okay, but it's the second part of the rule which has a bit of uncertainty. It says otherwise, if the preceding sound is an e or an e vowel sound, it'll be a ru verb in most cases. So we can see this is our uncertainty. So let's apply this rule to all these and see what's going on. Now our first one we have here is taberu. Now we see that it ends in a ru, so we don't really care about this, but we look at the sound before the ru, just like the rule says, the vowel sound preceding the ru. This bit here. Okay. Now it says if it's an a, u, or o vowel sound. Let's have a look. Well, be, if we want to think about it in Romaji, this is be. This is clearly not an a, u, or an a, u, or o sound. It is a e sound. Be is an e sound. So that this rule doesn't apply. So it must be otherwise, if the preceding sound is an e or an e vowel sound, there we go, there's e vowel, it'll be a ru verb in most cases. So that's why I've written here, likely to be a ru verb. We can't be 100% sure at this point. Let's look at our next one. We have miru. Okay, what's that sound before the ru? Well, it's mi. Now, what does our rule say? Well, a, u, or o, well, it's none of those. It must be an e or an e sound, and indeed it's an e. So it'll be a ru verb in most cases. So this is why I've written here, likely a ru verb. We can't know. Now I will point out that you can just look this up in the dictionary and it will tell you. So I can tell you 100% that taberu is a ru verb and miru is a ru verb. But we're not quite at that point yet. But you will have to check in the dictionary, by the way. We also have aru. Okay. Now this one means to exist, really handy verb. Now we see here aru, what's before this? We got an a, and what does our rule say? If the vowel sound preceding the ru is an a, u, or o, you'll always be an u verb. Well, we've got a right here. A before ru, so therefore it's an u verb. So I can be 100% sure about this one. It's definitely an u verb. What about this guy? Wakaru. Well, we got ka, and from what we just said, we said that an a sound tells us that this must be an u verb. All right, so we'll see that, of course, when we have an a, u, or o sound, we can be 100% sure that it's an u verb. It's not the case with ru. So we'll be building on this knowledge next week when we start looking at making changes to verbs. But for now, if you can just practice, think of any verb you can in English. We'll say to run. Go up into a dictionary like Jim Breen's dictionary, type in run, you should get out hashiru, okay? And then we try and work out, is hashiru a ru verb or an u verb? And just repeat this for as many verbs as you can think of in Japanese. And if you've got a dictionary, you should just do this about 10 or 20 times. And just practice saying, hey, is this a ru verb or an u verb? Because the goal is that you can make this determination without even thinking about it, really. It's got to be a memorization thing. But we also want to be able to use this rule, particularly when we come across a verb maybe we haven't heard before. We can use this rule to determine if it's a ru or an u verb. Now, like I said, we don't really know why we're doing this right now, but it's so that we can later on make verbs into past forms or negative forms. So this is just stage one, and you really need to practice this one a fair bit. But otherwise, tune into the next video and I will go through how we make these negative and past forms. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Check out the playlist. I've got all the other videos for my basic grammar series, and I'm pretty confident that if you go through this basic grammar series and learn what's contained within, you'll get competent basic Japanese, and you'll be well on your way to being able to pass JLPT N5 competency. You'll probably need to do a bit more kanji study, but at least the grammar, you'll have a very good grounding in it. Anyway, that's enough for me. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like. It really does help me support the channel a lot. I'm trying to make it grow, and I would really appreciate it if you could take the time to do that. Thanks again.